Remember when we had to get on the phone to this catalog in England to order docs, and it was like 4 a.m. hour?
I had a couple of surprises for you. So first of all,
Who's this young buck?
Oh my gosh! Look at that! Yeah, that's so funny, man. These were surprises to everyone listening. I did not know those were featured. That's pretty cool. Because I had started playing drums when I was like 10, and we started a ska band which was called Spies Like Us. See, I should have told you that secret. You might have been able to find something.
Wait a minute.
Manny, you want to roll that clip? Well, it may not be you.
That's not me though.
It's not you.
Oh my God, that is me. How in the world did you find that?
Holy goodness gracious.
I got skills, right?
How did you? I've never found that.
You want to keep watching it?
No, I mean that was pretty good.
Orthodoxy, punk rock, rebellion, all of that. What is it about orthodoxy that you think attracts so many of us?
I think if you are exploring the world of punk rock legitimately, you've got to dig, appreciate the search. There's going to be some painful aspects, but suffering to appreciate the beauty of what you're kind of getting into. Something that's real, pushing back against kind of a prevailing thin narrative, garbage in, garbage out, pop culture. Appreciating kind of beauty, uniqueness. There's an outcast feel to it. I think there's brotherhood, sisterhood. That search for the truth. I view it as what I feel that it is, the truth, the true church, the original church, one that has stood the test of time.
Libertarian friends who don't have God as their monarch. That their monarch, ours is Jesus Christ.
Well, that's why they have liberty as their monarch.
The band is only as good as your drummer. It shows the way you do your show, like the counterflow, that you're a drummer. That you listen to the rest of the musicians, because like one thing I noticed about how you play, like how you do your show, is you actually listen to your guest.
Hone in on them. And I'm like, that's a drummer. That's a good drummer. That's a
Good drummer. So when you said you're a drummer, I get that.
Yeah, that is I've never thought of it in those terms. The way I do play drums completely tracks with what you're saying.
Good day, my dear friends. Manoelia here. You're watching SOS Podcast, The Study of Stuff. And you're getting ready to watch the interview that I did with the amazing Buck Johnson from the Counterflow podcast. Man, what an interview this was. I was really looking forward to this interview. Big fan of Buck's for many long years. I really love his show. So it was quite the treat to interview him. And at one point, he mentioned that it kind of felt like we were just two buds having a conversation over a beer. And it really felt that way. It really did. We, of course, talked about punk rock. We talked about music. We talked about subculture. We talked about orthodoxy, most definitely. And truth. Truth seems to be the underlining thread amongst all the interviews I've done when it comes to people that come from the subculture to orthodoxy. This episode was shot a week before we had done the SOS radio broadcast, which if you haven't checked that out, you gotta go check it out. It was incredible. 4.5 hours of Buck and I just playing music, joking around, having fun. There was a surprise there that had something to do with this interview you're about to see. I hope you enjoy it. SOS radio. It's going pirate. We're doing some pirate radio stuff. I will be doing a quick live stream explaining the pirate radio probably this week, as well as talking about the network. A lot of people have been asking me about the network, what that's all about. And we're going to be talking about pirate radio because they're coming after us. They're trying to shut us down. And it's not just because we're playing music, because some of the copyrights, yeah, they bug people, but also other reasons too. Anyways, we'll get into all that. This week's quick little live stream update that I have set up and ready. Anyways, get ready. Enjoy this interview that I did with the amazing Buck Johnson. Word to Big Bird, jangly bang. We are live. I always say this. I think I'm going to continue saying this. I have a very special guest today, and the reason why I say that is because I always have special guests that I get excited about having on the show. This man right here, Buck Johnson, Counterflow Podcast. Before I introduce you, my friend, thank you for doing the show. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this.
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Well, so I was sitting down trying to think of like, how am I going to start this? What am I going to talk about? All this stuff, because I've been planning this for a long time. Like, I've been thinking about interviewing you for over a year now. So I have all these notes in my head, and I figured, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to kind of like go with the flow and just have a cool conversation with my buddy Buck.
Yeah.
But before we jump in, I just wanted I had a couple of surprises for you. So first of all, you're obviously a musician, and music is definitely a big part of your life, and it's a huge part. I just wanted to make a really cheesy joke. I don't obviously often do this. I don't
jokes.
I'm not a big fan of puns, but who's this young buck?
Oh my gosh. Look at that.
Right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that young fella. He had a lot less tattoos.
Uh-huh.
That is me. I can't exactly remember what that was about promo shot was for, but I used to love these sheer, we used to call them paper napkin shirts, and that's what that is. It's awesome.
Yes. And like I was looking at it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Buck. I'm pretty sure that's Buck, but I wasn't sure because of the tattoos. I'm like, where are the tattoos?
That's probably 2002 or 2003. Yeah, something like that. That was a young Rockabilly Buck.
Yes. And well, you're still doing the Rockabilly thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just throw this right up here real quick. Look at that guy. Who's that guy?
Look at that. Yeah.
I got one more. This one.
Jimmy Vaughn?
Yeah, Jimmy Vaughn. Dude, this killed me right here. That killed me, man. That absolutely destroyed me.
That's so funny, man. These were surprises to everyone listening. I did not know those were featured. That's pretty cool.
Dude, you played with Jimmy Vaughn. That's that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's based, as they say.
Yes. I've heard. He's one of us, I think.
He is. Not Orthodox per se, but politically certainly one of us. We did we did 2 Ron Paul festivals, giant ones. Actually more than 2, but we did the 2 huge ones and then several small ones. And then he refused to get the old jabby jab, so he was not able to do certain tours in Europe, which I thought was pretty good of him. So yeah. Yeah,
I'd like to think his brother would have followed. I don't think he would have done it either. Stevie Ray.
They were like actual true rock and roll rebels, not like Rage Against the Machine or these guys that pretend that they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Stevie Ray is one of my favorites. Obviously, like, how could you not love Stevie?
Yeah.
All right, let's just jump right into this. So basically, a lot of the things I wanted to talk about pertain to punk rock, the love of music, and how it pertains to why there's so many people that go from that subculture to orthodoxy. But before we get there, I want to lay down the groundwork on your backstory in terms of like why punk, what drew you to subculture in general, your connection to music, and then kind of from that we'll move towards the orthodoxy stuff. So start from wherever you want. I just really want to get the understanding of like what drew you into punk. What does that mean to you, subculture in general?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was always into music. My dad's a musician. I'll make that part of it short. I'm 47. I was born in 77. Even in, let's say, 85-ish, 86, I was getting albums. My dad would take me to the record store, and I would get like Hall & Oates, even like Wham, Michael Jackson, Billy Joel, and stuff that was kind of, I guess you would call pop music for the moment. Then my parents split. I moved to California because my mom married a guy from out there. So in Southern California and LA, in the late 80s, what was burgeoning up there, what became huge, Guns N' Roses, Poison, Motley Crue. So I started liking that stuff along with, this will take us into a different way, so we don't have to go too far. My love for the football team, the Raiders, which I have still tattooed on me. And that was that hip hop, NWA, graffiti scene that I got in. It was surrounding me in LA there. So I fell into that, to start tagging. And then moved to San Antonio for high school. And I just somehow fell in with like subculture types. I think I was always one to kind of look outside the box, politically, musically. I hate when people go, I just didn't fit in, because like people that fit in say that they didn't. And I did, because I was friends with like preppy guys and the cheerleaders. I was fond of the women, and I was friends with the football team. But the subculture, the skinheads and the punks were just kind of like my natural, is who I was drawn to. And it's funny because like Nirvana started getting big right around then, but not like pop or what you would call now. It's not like Taylor Swift. And so I even had an appreciation for some of that stuff because there was a punk edge to it, some of it. And yeah, the punk stuff, I just started discovering a lot of oi and ska. The ska stuff was like the Boss Tones. I loved the oi stuff, Talks Bar, The Business. And then hardcore. I loved New York hardcore, Agnostic Front, Minor Threat. The Bad Brains. Gorilla Biscuits. I started getting into all of that stuff as well. And these kids I was hanging with, they were like skaters, skinheads, punks. It was kind of that mix of all, even like a psychobilly and stuff like that. And I started playing in a ska band because I had started playing drums when I was like 10, and so that had carried through into my high school years. And we started a ska band, which was the first one in San Antonio, not the first one in Texas. That we already had some in Texas, called Spies Like Us. See, I should have told you that secret. You might have been able to find something to pull. But
meanwhile, on SOS Radio,
Manny, you want to roll that clip? Well, it may not be you.
That's not me, though.
It's not you.
Oh my God, that is me. How in the world did you find that? Holy goodness gracious.
I got skills, right?
How did you? I've never found that.
I can send it to you.
the link in our description at The Study of Stuff.
That's Buck's
Oh my
band
gosh,
right there.
That's me on drums. I was like 18.
Can you turn it up, Manny? Can you hear that, Buck?
Yeah.
This is a good band, dude.
Unfortunately, I can hear it.
It's as loud as it goes.
Oh, San Antonio. Oh yeah, the clip is horrible. That's right.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, I found a whole show. There's a whole bunch of bands. I guess you guys were playing at this place.
Yeah, the dancing was so heavy this night. It's an old like 40s house. Its bar was. The floor sunk in like 6 inches down.
Yes, that's amazing.
I remember this.
It's a crazy band, dude.
Mystic Sisters, baby.
It takes me back. All right, man.
Me too. Let's see. Well, I was 19, so I don't. I mean, this was the, mid or early 90s. So I don't know how much recordings. But the funny thing is, those guys to this day still play. Obviously, there's been many lineup changes. I think 3 guys are still the same. We started playing ska shows, and boy, those were rough. Not the way we sounded, although maybe so, but like there was the San Antonio, let's say, subculture scene can be pretty brutal. And there was fights constantly. It's like different factions and who's it going to be at this gig and who's at that one. And it was fun for a little bit. And then I started discovering rockabilly around this time too. Miraculously, my parents were split, like I mentioned, and somehow I ended up with these records that I assume were my dad's. And it was Ricky Nelson, the Elvis Sun Sessions.
Yes.
Johnny Cash and Ray Price, some old country stuff, Marty Robbins. And I like randomly started listening to it because I was so into music, and I found these records and like, let me hear these. And I knew somehow when I heard the early Elvis stuff, I was like, I think this is what they call rockabilly, like the Stray Cats. So I started looking that kind of stuff up. And then I was getting tired of all the violence in the ska and the skinhead shows. So some of us also started getting into rockabilly and surf music. And then a few of us from the core of the ska band said, let's also do this surf and rockabilly band. So we started doing that, and that became a pretty big band in San Antonio, enough to where as I grew to be 17-ish and maybe 18, I was making enough money playing every Friday and Saturday to like make a living. So we were playing to pretty crowded places. That was a fun time. And so that took me into my high school graduation, if you will. So you can ask stuff from there, like we can stop at a question point.
Well, yeah, because you just went through a whole bunch of different genres, and you meant, and like I know exactly how you feel, because I did that a lot too. Like I like jumping around genres. There's just something about it. Like I like to get to the essence, to the root of something. You know what I mean? So like
100%.
When you brought up rockabilly and like Sun Records and all that, like the slap back and then having one microphone and trying to like mix the room, there was something about that always caught my attention. And everything you mentioned, it seems like you go to that point.
Yes, absolutely. I always hated, like I said, like Nirvana started getting popular for a second, and I immediately was like, what's the first thing they did? Yeah. And Pearl Jam kind of got big, and I was like, well, what's the Temple of the Dog or whatever, this other thing they did? And I always wanted to keep going back.
Me too.
And so that was part of it. And I didn't like modern punk so much. Like people now look back and they're like, oh, I think, I don't know, pop punk or there's another name they call it, but see, I don't even know it because I don't like it. But Blink 182 to some people is like, that's an older band. I'm like, no, it's just not my thing. But I liked like Exploited and Misfits and stuff with like, just felt like more of an original punch, if you will.
Well, my nephew, sorry to interrupt you there, because like my nephew, we started doing the radio show together, and he rides shotgun, and he's like listening to all this punk background history that I'm dropping everywhere, and I'm like, because he brought up Blink 182, I'm like, have you heard of the Descendants? So we sat down, we put that on, and he's like, this sounds exactly like that. I'm like, yeah, or like Green Day, and then you go back to Operation Ivy, you're like, come on, man, like, you know. Right. So sorry, I didn't mean to now that's got me geeking out on music, dude.
Yeah, because I think you feel the same way. So there was always, I never liked whatever was called contemporary of the day. Just, I used to say, man, I wish I could turn on the TV, like whatever show's on, get in my car, turn on the radio, like whatever music's on, and turn on a news station and agree with whatever garbage they're spewing. And then one day I was like, no, I don't wish I could do that, because there's been moments where you're frustrated, like, well, why am I always different than everyone else and everything I think? But now it's like, well, I'm good. I'm glad. I don't want to be that way. But there were moments where I'd ride a wave of back and up and down of like stress over like, man, I'm always the one disagreeing, or like Minor Threats, like I'm out of step with the world. But, you know, a lot of the bands that we were listening to felt the same way, which I think is kind of why we were drawn to some of the messaging.
Yeah, I fully agree. Well put. And as a drummer, that's so for me. In my band, the two most important positions, I call them positions, were drums and bass always. And I always found that your band is only as good as your drummer, and like that's something that some people say, but they don't really practice. Right. And it really shows. And even when because I'm kind of taking a little bit of sidestep, I don't mean to, but it shows the way you do your show, like the counterflow, that you're a drummer, that you listen to the rest of the musicians. Because like one thing I noticed about how you play, like how you do your show, is you actually listen to your guest. Not taking any shots on anyone, but you really like hone in on them. And I'm like, that's a drummer. That's a good drummer. That's a good drummer. So when you said you're a drummer, I'm like, I get that.
Yeah, that is I've never thought of it in those terms, but the way I do play drums completely tracks with what you're saying. So that makes sense.
Well, watching you on that footage, I could hear you doing it. You tilt your head, and I'm like, I know what he's doing. He's listening for the bass player. Oh, he's listening to the singer. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a drummer right there. Because like I'm a sloppy player. I'm like a Tom Waits kind of lead man. So I like chaos, and I like destruction, and like in a chaotic but organized way. And then if you don't have a drummer behind you backing you, you fall apart.
Yes, right. Yeah, a friend of mine has played bass for at least 10 years for Willie Nelson. And as you know, his guitar playing and rhythm and singing is just insanely all over the place. And I asked my friend Kevin plays bass for him, and I said, how do you he goes, I don't pay attention to Willie. Me and the drummer, we're locked in. Willie can do whatever the heck he wants, and we're still playing the same song. And Willie knows that and knows when to fall back towards the groove or leave it wherever he wants.
It's funny that you brought that up because I've in my band, my former band, my guitar was a busted up old Mexican flamenco guitar that I converted, and we compared it to Trigger. That's his guitar.
Yep. Wow.
So, well, we veered off there.
No, it's been good. I love this.
I think we're really touching on the reality of subculture, what it means, just in this little back and forth here. So describe to me, what is punk to you? Like, what is subculture? What is punk? Like, how would you define that? Like, to your kids, let's say, your grandkids.
This is off the top of my head. I tease myself, I suppose, to my friends that I'm an underthinker, because everyone always goes, I'm an overthinker. And I think, well, I'm an underthinker. So I haven't articulated this or broke it down necessarily, but punk or subculture would be a rebellion against the prevailing overbearing regime, narrative, or the prevailing culture, I suppose. I think punk first started, I'm pretty certain. I don't like to ever say on recordings, I know this, or this is what this is the fact, but I would say that punk started in a rebellion to what I call album rock of the 70s, where these Jethro Tull, and I love Tom Woods, the podcaster. Him and I are friends, but I always think when Tom loves like Rush and those kind of bands, and I always think I'm glad those bands existed, because that's why punk rock exists, because it's pushing back against this just lengthy, mundane. I've always hated the Eagles. I hate Rush.
Yes,
I'm not a fan of that kind of it just is so establishment rock, if you will. I've always hated the term rock too, because that's what it represents to me. So punk was screw that. We don't need all the guitar solos. We're going to get down and dirty and play in your face. And it's almost a masculine punch to a prevailing feminine energy.
You said you're an underthinker. I doubt it. You're a philosophical thinker. That was a great answer, especially off the top of the dome. That's banging. I fully agree with that sentiment, and I'm laughing the whole time because I'm sure my former bandmates are, if they watch this, they'll be like, "Dude, this guy sounds like you." Because I'm Canadian, so I don't like Rush, right? And they're like, "How can you all like Rush? They're Canadian." Anyway.
Yeah, that's probably sacrilege up there. I forgot that's their space. Well, I don't like Celine Dion either, so hello Canadians. I'm not sorry.
Don't be sorry, man. Don't be sorry. We have some cool punk bands, but they don't get so much traction. So keeping with what you just said and your description of punk and subculture, so now take me into what is it about Orthodoxy that you think attracts so many of us? Because I've had obviously Father Turbo on, I've had Father John Valadez on recently. I've had Gene Reeves on, another Texan firefighter, also from the San Antonio hardcore scene from the 90s though. And then I recently interviewed. Yeah. So
I really got to reach out to Gene then. I mean, that's why I was in San Antonio during that. Maybe we've been in a fight. We don't know it.
It's possible you have dock marks on your face. His.
No, he would. No, I'm joking.
Probably. But and he's incredible. Wait till I put that episode out. His story is pretty cool. And then I also had Orthodox Outcast this week as well.
Stuff is great.
Awesome.
His music and his aesthetics on his Instagram photos. It's by far my favorite follow.
Absolutely. Me too. I'm actually using some of his footage for a video I'm putting together. But everyone kind of I've gotten everyone's take on what was it about Orthodoxy that attracted each one of them? And a lot of them myself is included, had a common thread. So I want to hear your reasoning. What is it that you think attracted all of us to Orthodoxy?
I think if you are exploring the world of punk rock legitimately, not like, hey, I listen to Blink 182. You know, I know that even sounds like a throwback. I'm sure there's other bands that took that same track. But if I'm listening to whatever's on the radio on pop punk radio, but if you're truly exploring it, for one, you've got to dig. You have to appreciate the search as part of it. You have to appreciate let's say, you know, there's going to be some painful aspects of it, like say attending a hardcore show. You know, I went through getting pushed around or getting kicked, or there's things that are going to be in a different way than we know it of now in Orthodoxy, but suffering to appreciate the beauty of what you're kind of getting into. And I think there's an appreciation for something that's real, that's pushing back against kind of a prevailing thin narrative or garbage in, garbage out pop culture, something like that. So appreciating kind of beauty, uniqueness, even though you could say like, well, they all have mohawks, they're not unique. But I mean, in relative to the rest of society, there's an outcast feel to it. I think there's kind of a brotherhood, sisterhood, if you will, to like, we all had to go through this to get to this beauty that we find in punk rock or ska, like true ska music or oi. You know, everyone, it's like, I was just talking to some old skinheads this past weekend. I was at a thing in Vegas, and it was like, remember when we had to get on the phone to this catalog in England to order docs, and it was like 4 a.m. our time because they weren't, you know, just that kind of stuff. And it's like, remember when we went to this record store that was an hour away and you had to dig through the back and then there's a ska section and you found this one thing. Now it is harder to appreciate some of that because it's literally, you can find anything anywhere on just a few clicks online. But that search for what we would have said then at the time is for the truth, I think just kind of formed bonds and made you feel like there was a more of a substance and depth to it than rather like, oh, I just turned on the radio and whatever they shoved down my throat sounded good to me. It's just kind of the anti-normie thing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's most definite. And then you brought up crate digging or like just the appreciation of finding that album or buying those docs. You appreciated it more. I mean, it's something that sounds like old guys say, but it's true. I remember like Tuesdays when an album would drop, you would stand in line overnight on a Monday just to get that album. And in the in the lineup, you met so many cool people. Yes, and form bonds like that. The doc stuff. I remember me and certain friends would get steel toes and we would cut the leather off the top of the steel globe area. And we learned like, well, there are different colors of the steel below. Like, how did docs know to do this? So we would find this fascinating. What color was your steel? Mine was blue. You know, even little bonds like that were kind of fun. True. I forgot about that. Oh my God. I forgot about that. That's so true. Oh, that took me back. Oh my God. Yeah. Those kind of things. So it still sits back in your heart somewhere. It does. I know what you mean with the Orthodox comparison there, because like, I was raised Orthodox, but I don't feel I kind of bonded or I didn't understand it. I've mentioned it a million times on this podcast, but recently, like the last couple of years, I've been kind of going back to that, and it does require the same effort it did with like music. Like you had to dig and go, what band influenced this band, and then go all the way back to Sun Records and go, okay, so punk is Jerry Lee Lewis's punk, you know, Little Richard, that's punk. Maybe Bob Wills back in the, you know, before. It's like he was the one pissing the kind of prevailing regime off, like, how can you play this kind of swing music with a fiddle and all this? And he's kind of like, F you to that kind of stuff. So, totally. I mean, that true rebellion, which is why we can get into this if you want. I don't want to go on a tangent, but the 2020, 2021, and those years that we all are very well aware of, when you would see quote unquote punk rockers completely going with that stuff, and you're like, dude, it kind of was like a kick in the gut a little bit to me, or made me feel naive, like, oh, well, what a joke
some of you guys were.
Yep.
Why did I listen to, is it Fat Mike and even what's his name from Dead Kennedys? It's like
yes.
Jello Biafra. Like, what a bunch of posers. Yeah, is all I can think.
Totally.
And luckily, a lot of the hardcore bands, which is why I'm sporting Madball, and Al Barr ended up having to leave Dropkick Murphys for this. Him and I were in some contact. Reverend Horton Heat, as you know, is on my show, got a lot of flack for it. So there were true like heroes that it proved like, oh, he really is a rebel, or she really is a rebel. A lot of these people are just in it for, I guess, the sellout cash, just to be comfy posers of sorts.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Like, there's a lot of like, even going through like playlists, I'm like, I want to play some bands, but I'm like, I think twice. And like, even last time when you were on in the chats, I was like, I had a hard time. Like, I'm like Bad Religion. I'm like, do I agree with a lot of their political? Nah, I'll play it anyways. But but then there's some bands where there's a lot. Like, actually, I'm doing a discussion panel on Monday on this very subject. Like, what's your line? Like, there's some artists I'll continue playing, but some that I can't. Like Gogo Bordello was one of my favorite bands. I just can't stomach that crap. Like, I can't.
Yeah. I will say, if this helps, I mean, this is a private conversation I had, but I don't think he'd mind me saying it, with Justin Marler. He has told me, I can't think of the name right now, but the singer from Operation Ivy is
Tim. No, it wasn't Tim. No. I forgot his name too. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. What about him? Sorry.
He's curious about our world.
Okay.
So Justin said, pray for him.
Okay.
I say it's Mike something, but I can't think of it. And Justin was close with Green Day. He mentioned that Billy Joe is a pretty troubled soul. So praying for him is probably helpful. And he mentioned Ian MacKaye from Fugazi and Mike Brett as being a very spiritual, like, wonderful man. So that was some of the insights that he gave me, which I found interesting.
Okay, I always wondered about Ian, because listening to his lyrics and the way he holds himself, I'm like, this guy's gonna end up there. Like, after I saw these punks going Orthodoxy, I'm like, he's gonna end up there. He used to go visit Justin at the monastery. That's pretty cool. I haven't announced it yet, but Justin will be on the show next.
Oh, good.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks.
Got a reissue of his book coming out.
Sorry?
He's got a reissue of that book coming out.
He does. Oh, I can't wait. You have a copy of that. I don't.
I was willing to waste a few $100. It was more than a few hundred on it. I'm glad I did. And a friend of mine, Mother Nectaria, is a wonderful, sweet, holy Orthodox nun. She's helping him edit it. I hope I'm not giving anything that's a secret. I don't think it is. But she's awesome too, and she's helping him right now. And I'm not bragging on this, but it's neat for me. I reconnected them. They had lost connection for over, I think, a decade. And I had been in touch with him and her, and she's like, he was my spiritual son. And I was like, well, how about I connect you all again? So she's helping him with the book.
So she's the one that introduced him to Orthodoxy, where he talks about in his story. Is that the one? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. She said she can't remember if it was her at the bookstore or her sister, no pun intended, no none intended. But she said it was either her or one of her sisters in the monastery there. But yeah, she was part of that whole thing of getting him in.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And yeah, even talking to him privately, he's like quite a character, like in a good way. I mean, he
has a very funny sense of humor too.
He does, and he has a really good timing. Like, he sent me something, and it's like he knew I needed it. Like, he's like working on another manuscript, and I was like, whoa, I need this right now. It's amazing.
Very cool.
Anyways, I can't. Getting back on track. Orthodoxy, punk rock, rebellion, all of that. So, if you were to kind of describe, what does Orthodoxy mean to you? Like, how do you view it? And I'm using the term broadly, Eastern Orthodox. Everyone knows, like, ancient Christianity is what I'm referring to. How do you view that? And then how do you kind of square it with the rebellion you described in the whole punk rock subculture movement?
I view it as what I feel that it is, the truth, the true church, the original church, one that has stood the test of time. As Father Turbo told me, and I don't think this is should be secret. I think he would be willing to say this. You have to quit worrying about saving or what's best for the United States. Empires fall, they rise, they come again, they implode, and the church has remained steady as a steady force throughout that. And that's because it is Christ's church, and he is the truth. And so it's kind of how you view everything. Like I've heard certain sects of Christianity say, well, I'm an American and I'm a dad and I'm a Christian. And so it's almost like you can separate different aspects of your life. And in Orthodoxy, it's we always say this, it's a worldview because it's literally represents the world, everything. And so I think that's a bit of a different, let's say, more macro, wider lens than some might be used to using. Makes things, it's funny, it's everything, there's so many paradoxes in Orthodoxy, so it makes things more beautiful, truly more beautiful, and makes things more difficult at times. And so I think it seems, to borrow Justin's tagline, like the last true rebellion, because there's so much garbage, pop culture, politics, narratives, media, all of these things that are overloads on our senses that, it's like we all, and I'm guilty of it, by the way, I'm not casting stones. We all look at these things every day and look at our phones and do this, and it gets you frustrated. And it's like, why is this getting me frustrated? Because this is all garbage. It's not real. And then you can go and pray in front of icons, and it's like, why was this like calmed me? It's like, because you were participating in what's true and real. And so it kind of helps you clean your filter a little bit, and as your noose, as we say, clean it off a little bit and help you view things in a better light.
Yeah, well put. I agree, and it does kind of have that. It is the last true rebellion, because when you kind of keep digging, if you crate digging, you'll end up at that album. It's all off. It's that. It is, because like I went through a whole bunch of different. I went deep into the cult and all that stuff, and at the end, I just realized everything was an inversion of this. And then I started to take everything and flip it. And when I flipped it, it was literally all of the Orthodox principles, ideals, and way of life. And like, it is a rebellion in that sense. And it is against everything that is out there. And I like that you brought up the whole US situation. Well, you didn't bring it up, but we're kind of moving in that. I think Father Turbo is correct to say that let that empire kind of fall, to paraphrase what he's saying. And I agree, because a lot of people are asking me some of these questions, like, what do I believe? And I was interviewed on a friend's podcast, and we were talking, and he comes from a libertarian / anarcho-capitalist / agoristic kind of background. So not he himself, but the podcast. And I just was reminded of a little talk I gave at Mariposa Freedom Festival here, sponsored by Anarchapulco. And at that point, everything was falling apart for me. I had read a couple of documents that kind of pushed me out of the New Age, The Changing Image of Man. I'm sure if you're familiar with that document, but it kind of changed my whole view on how I saw social engineering and culture creation. And I had already been looking into the Orthodox stuff because of a lot of you guys online. It kind of piqued my interest. Starting from 2014 with Jay Dyer and James Perloff and a few others. So anyways, not to keep rambling, but this speech that I gave, I had to like throw it out. And then on the spot, I just kind of just winged it. And I remember talking to this group. At this point, I wouldn't have called myself Orthodox, but I was playing with the idea of what are rights. Because I'm talking to anarchists, I'm talking to agorists and all this, and I started off by saying something along the lines of like, is anybody here a monarchist? And they all kind of pushed their chairs forward and kind of were like, well, where's this guy going with this? And like, I'll tell you, by the end of my speech, I think we're all going to agree that we're all monarchists. So I didn't get into like the whole, Orthodox perspective on monarchy, because I wasn't there yet, but I was trying to explain to them that monarchos like means the one ruler. So therefore, if you're not a ruler of yourself, somebody else will be ruling you. Because I was talking about social engineering, culture creation, and they're just going to manipulate your ideologies, your belief systems, COVID, for example, all this stuff, and they're going to guide you that way. And if you're not a ruler of yourself, therefore someone else is ruling you. And by that, the end, I asked them to put up their hands, and most of the people did put their hands up on monarchy. But
Really?
you can kind of see them go like, the way you mean it, yes.
Are
But
they
not
looking at me? Right. Yeah.
exactly. So that takes me to the next phase of this conversation. So you were a libertarian, or however you want to view yourself in the past. How do you square rights? Like, how do you define rights? What are rights? How do you see that now?
See, that's something I'm still grappling with mentally. I would say I don't necessarily love using that term because I remember my friend Jeff Deist, former president of the Mises Institute, gave a speech on meaningless terms, meaningless words. And of course, like racism or misogyny, or it's like, it's been so diluted that it's like, well, what does that mean? And there's no real, you could just, Donald Trump's a Nazi or something like that. It's like, well, okay. And rights are starting to get into that, because part of the problem with libertarianism is when you say, I'm just against force. And it's like, well, force, that's a lot of people would say, if you don't give someone welfare, you're forcing them to be starving. Are you against that? Well, no, that's different. And so rights become, there's a term called reproductive rights, and then right to life. Well, that can't be in the same discussion. They're opposite. So how would you square that? So what does a right mean to you? It almost becomes subjective, and then you get into relativism, and then it's like, then there is nothing. So there is no truth. It's just how everyone feels. And then you say the statement, well, there is no truth. It's like, well, that's a statement of truth that you just said. Yes. So that's a self-defeating argument in itself. And then, so you come back to, it's hard to square what a right is. And so I guess I'm not a constitution person. I think it's okay that we have it, I suppose. I mean, we were certainly better off than Australia during 2020 and 2021. And I think in part because there's some semblance of the Constitution left. But I suppose rights within that might be helpful, like the right to bear arms. Okay, fair. Right to free speech, that's been destroyed. In fact, the right to bear arms in some aspects has been destroyed. So it's interesting that even within a context where I would find it somewhat helpful, it's barely helpful. It's barely hanging on, if you will. Certainly the 10th Amendment, the rights of the states to do as they please, and as long as it's not mentioned in the Constitution for the feds to do, it's like, well, that's gone. If we had a civil war here, what is it? The Third Amendment about the quartering troops, that'd be gone. The Fourth Amendment's gone, with the right to not to from illegal searches and whatnot. That's gone. So it's almost like, do we have rights even in the document that's kind of explaining them? And another thing I hate about it is given from God, and it's like, where in the Orthodox Church is it presented from the fathers or from anyone that we are given rights from God? And if anyone listening knows more than me, you're certainly welcome to comment, but I'm not aware of that. So I don't like that the Constitution or that constitutionalists use that language. I find that strange. Just say, if you're going to make a constitution for, say, a libertarian republic, just say your rights are given because you're born in this country and we're giving you them on this piece of paper, and this piece of paper is law. Bam. Yep. Then you can make that. That's fine. I get it. Because you start to get into this universalist claims that libertarians get into, and it's like, well, you all have the right to, let's say, to your property. And it's like, well, the guy in Mexico does? Where's his property start and end? So there's this weird thing of like, does the person in Brazil have a right to free speech? Well, not according to the Constitution, but there's libertarians that claim universalist rights. Yes. So it gets a very, and I'm sorry to ramble on and on because I'm kind of articulating as I go here, but it gets into a very muddy conversation.
Oh no, you're not rambling at all. You took it exactly where I wanted to go with the whole concept of from God's perspective, because they say God-given rights. Like I wrote a song where I had to like really, it was right when I was leaving that world and kind of going into Orthodoxy, and I struggled with that. And I look back at that song and I call it Natural Man. And I wasn't necessarily making reference to like you're a natural man in the legal, libertarian sense of the word.
Right.
But some people that were Orthodox kind of got bothered with that because they thought I was referring to natural law. From the Catholic perspective, whatever, the Roman Catholic perspective. And I wasn't. I was trying to kind of do it from the perspective of like God's agreement with us isn't a right. Like there's no there's no right to do all these things. And I hear Andrew Wilson go into this quite a bit, and Jim Bob, and they're talking about rights, and it's more of an obligation. And I like the way that they put it because it's true. Yeah. Because it's the right to live or whatever. Well, that's just, we've agreed that I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to do that, right? Like I'm not going to do that. But if I did, well, is there something stopping me? You know what I'm saying? And then it's a strange concept. So how do you see God's? How do I word this? So yeah, because you took it to a lot of the places I wanted to go with God and God's agreement with us in terms of like why we exist and all this stuff. And the American ideals are a good reason why we have a lot of the things we have, and the reason we are free to some degree, and right to bear arms and all that stuff. Yes, obviously they came to question, and freedom of speech and all that. But how do you square that with some of your libertarian friends who don't have God as their monarch? That their monarch, ours is Jesus Christ.
Well, that's why they have liberty as their monarch. They have, I was just talking to a friend of mine, that everyone has a God. There's no such thing as a true atheist unless you're speaking of only the Christian God, which they're not. The libertarians, there's many atheist libertarians. I was one. And your God is human flourishing, if you will, is this concept that you have in your mind, or liberty, or the non-aggression principle, the NAP. Those people, libertarianism is Christianity without Christ.
Yes.
So there's the golden rule: don't harm anyone, don't take their things, don't do unto others as you don't want them to do to you. That's somewhat the core of libertarianism, but they're taking Christ out of it and just saying, I just want this legal concept where you don't hurt me. But the problem is there's still going to be what I would call a God-shaped hole in your heart, but for libertarianism, in the philosophy at large, and you get into, well, it's nature abhors a vacuum, as they say. And when you take Christ out of your legal system, something's going to fill it. And I think, unfortunately, libertarianism gives too wide of a puzzle here, let's say too wide of some barriers where something can start to fill in that gap that you're leaving, because you get into the relativism issue, which is because of postmodernists. Unfortunately, we have that. And it's like, well, what do you think's your right? Well, I think my right's not to be poor. And so then the evil people can start to come in and fill a void that you've unfortunately left there because you've taken Christ out, which is the ultimate truth.
Wow. You say you're not a thinker. I don't believe you. It seems like you have put a lot of thought into this, and it's not just regurgitating things that you've heard. I could feel that you mean on what you just said. Like there is truth. And like truth seems to be the governing thread that everyone has mentioned when they were talking. Like I'm talking about people that came out of the subculture, and I consider libertarianism to be a type of subculture, and even like your path seems to be like you're just following the truth, right? And truth is a who, not a what, as we often say, and you will end up at Christ if you just keep digging.
I got a point to make really quick. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see Alex Jones?
I did.
Oh my gosh. So I want to tell him, I want to talk to him, because he, in an interesting way, lots of twists and turns involved in this, but he kind of brought me to Orthodoxy. And I want to tell him, like, Alex, like my search for quote unquote truth started in 98 when I saw you on public access and you're questioning all these things. Then I started listening to you on the radio and it's like, okay, he's asking a lot of questions that are not allowed to be asked. So he's looking further than the kind of surface level stuff you're told. And at some point, I just kept looking and looking and looking. And here we are at Orthodoxy. And I thought on the 4th hour of his show on Fridays, has had Jay Dyer for quite some time. And the other day he had Father Peter Hears.
Yes.
And I'm like, Alex, you can only hear Jay Dyer and Father Peter Hears for so long before you make the final jump into the ultimate truth, which I think he's like on the doorstep, if you will.
Yes. Oh no, that's so true. Actually, I saw you posted that on Twitter. I'm rarely on Twitter, and I jumped on and you posted it, and that's how I saw Alex. I'm like, Alex Jones is Alex Jones. He's like going off on Orthodoxy. I was like, okay, something's changed in the cosmos.
Yes.
Most definitely.
Yes. He went from just 6 months ago or less defending Israel to questioning Israel to wait a second, and so something is happening. And he's on the doorstep. And I thought it was funny when he said, some of the Orthodox guys I've heard online, I said, this sounds like InfoWars. It's like, yes, that's what attracted me to some of it.
Yes, and I'm going to bring up Father Seraphim Rose because that's exactly where this all ties this all together. The guys, I had the guys from Synaxis podcast. I mean, I have them on all the time, and one of them mentioned. How did they put it? I apologize, gentlemen. I'm going to paraphrase it. They said Seraphim Rose is the patron saint of the lost Westerner.
I think we always say he's the patron saint of lost Westerners.
Something along those lines. And I was like, that is so true. And then I would take it one step further. And if I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, so forgive me to anyone out there if I'm saying something that's sacrilege or anything like that. But he's like the patron saint of the subculture people, like all of us. Like,
no doubt. I mean, look at Father John Justin. All of that death to the world stuff was heavily centered around Father Seraphim Rose. My entire journey was heavily centered around Father Seraphim Rose. I mean, he represents the search for truth that Westerners have gone in modern subculture. He was, well, for one, he was gay. Two, he was into Timothy Leary and these
Alan Watts.
And the drug, the hippie culture, and all these things. And Eastern mysticism. And he's searching and searching and searching in the Bay Area in the '60s, the hippie culture, which was pushed by the CIA, but that's a whole different story. But just the fact that he kind of went through a subculture search to find truth.
And that was one of the things that he made things make sense. Death to the World, like following that made things make sense. And I mentioned this to Father Turbo. I mentioned it when I was doing my live stream on SOS. I remember the first time I was listening to you and Father Turbo talking, and I had heard I heard of Father Turbo before, and I'm sitting there listening to these two guys talking, and I was like in the background, and then you guys are talking about Cro-Mags and all this stuff, and I'm like, what is it? Is that the priest? So I go back and I'm like, it's the priest. It wasn't Buck Johnson. It was the priest. And I'm like, okay, this is crazy. And then just getting to know Orthodoxy so I grew up cradle Orthodox, but that's not the Orthodoxy I knew.
Right.
And I saw the subculture and how you guys were all presenting it. So like that definitely that line helped me through all of you guys. And then when I started to read Father Seraphim Rose and I started to read Orthodoxy of the Orthodoxy, the Religion of the Future, I was like, okay, so this guy is talking straight up conspiracy theory, which is what I grew up talking about. Like literally, this guy is talking about exactly that stuff. I'm like, who is this guy? Then I read nihilism, totally destroys me, like just destroys me. I'm still trying to understand it. And like, so for you, how do you tie in all the subculture stuff? And like, I could see there's a change with a lot of us. And even going back to watching some of your older episodes, I went back and I started watching some of them, things I've seen before. I'm like, there's a huge change in Buck in like less than a year or so, like a huge change. Oh yeah, go back and check them out, man. All of you guys.
I know when you sent me that one of me interviewing Reverend Horton Heat, I thought, oh, I'm glad he's listening to this. And for me, I was like, oh, I can't. I don't want to look.
You should. I think you should. Even like, because I did an episode, a discussion group about online orthodoxy, and I checked with Father Turbo, and I sent them the conversation you guys had and a few others, and I'm like, I'm basing it on this conversation. I think this is important. Because for me, I'm trying to take a more humbled approach. Although I talked a lot more on this episode than I normally do. It's like
because we're having a conversation like we're in a bar or something.
It just kind of feels like. And like I'm trying to learn from all these people, but online orthodoxy, and then I'm just trying to understand a lot of these individuals that are being criticized positively and negatively, like, and I'm just trying to kind of piece it together and square. And I get some of the criticisms, but overall, I've gone back and I listened to a lot of the people that are being criticized, and you see a change. You see a huge change. Like you're not criticized often. That's not what I mean. But like, let's say Jay, for example,
yes,
people go after him or Andrew Wilson, and I could see a huge change even recently in a lot of his style. And I think guys like that, they're the they're out there practicing apologetics, and like that is something that the early church did do. And it's not for me because I'm still trying to learn, and I appreciate that they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And then I appreciate guys like yourself who, from an outside observer, you refer to yourself as your humble narrator. And I think you are your humble host, and you are, that comes across. You're just trying to learn, and then there's guys like Father Turbo who's puts like a humoristic twist on, you know what I mean? Like this is a cool community. I don't even know what I'm rambling about, but my point is, how do you view all this stuff, like the online orthodoxy stuff, subculture, truth? How do you mix it all together? Because you have a really good take on a lot of this.
That's a deep, nuanced question. I try just to do it in the humble way. For one, I don't have what I would say. This is my underthinking part of things. I don't have this like chart where I'm like, I'm going to do this, and put it all together, and it's going to make people think this, and then I just kind of get on these mental tangents, spiritual tangents, where I'm like, get fascinated, like let's say by Israel stuff, which is what I'm interviewing someone about tomorrow, and geopolitical stuff. And for a month, let's say I keep reading about it. I want to talk to people about it. And then my mind starts wandering off into, let's say, church fathers or Father Seraphim Rose, excuse me. And so mine's just kind of my meandering thoughts as things go along, and I try to present it. I don't like to ever say, you should do this, I know this, you have to do this. I don't like that type of thing. I present what I feel is factual and truthful out there. That's up to you, the listener, the reader, the watcher, to take it and do what you will with it. Hopefully it can be edifying to people. I'm not bragging, but I do know for a fact that it has been helpful to people because they've told me. And so I'm just taking what they've told me as factual. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, funny enough, have the same journey. It's like, hey, I listened to you when you had Death to Tyrants, and I was a hardcore anarcho-capitalist. And then I started just kind of ditching libertarianism. Then I was right wing, and now I'm getting baptized. And it's such a strange. It's nothing. See, like that's an example. I never thought, well, I'm going to get into only talking about orthodoxy, and I'm going to make sure people become Orthodox. I just did what was my meandering mind and thought process led me to do, and here we are. So it seems like it has helped people, and I will say it's tough, putting out content constantly, especially for me. I'm always getting other people. It becomes, we're like, maybe I should take like a month off. And then like I have letters on my refrigerator from people that have written me like handwritten letters. And then I see that and I'm like, no, this means a lot to people. I'll figure something out. So it actually kind of helps me, kind of keep motivated hearing what it means to different people.
No, I think you should do more. Actually, find a way to make this your full time job. That I really do.
I would love to do that. It's when your full time job is firefighter and you work sometimes 70 something hours a week. That's like, well, now I got to research this book. Now I got to talk to this person. Then I got to reach out. Then I got to get to my producers. So it's just a lot,
Yeah, we're working on something to help people do get there, like all of us. So yeah, we'll talk for sure.
Yeah, all right. I need it.
I think you should, man. And like you mentioned helping people. Absolutely, dude. You've definitely helped me for sure. 100%. And I've referenced you on many episodes. And I try to like always bring up people that have helped me along the way. Your name's always obviously mentioned, even from people like someone asked me recently, who's this Buck guy? And I'm like, well, I would describe him as the Joe Rogan of our world. I would say for sure, because that's your approach. It does come off that way. So I'm not trying to, kiss your ass here. That's not my intent.
No, that's a nice, yeah. I mean, and I take his On It products and we both work out. I don't know, watch UFC. It works. I'll take it.
I know you have, we're almost getting close to the end, but I wanted to kind of end things off by like asking you spiritual warfare. I know it's a big subject to leave towards the end. I'm not, that is something that I've brought up in every episode recently, especially since I had Father John on. That's a big reason why I had him on. I had him on to talk about the punk to Orthodoxy thing, but most of the second half, if not most of our conversation, was about spiritual warfare. Lent, obviously, we're getting close to Holy Week. Yes. I'm starting to get like a lot of messages nowadays. A lot of people are reaching out to me. It seems to be quite the responsibility. I'm trying to be like, talk to a priest, check out this guy's podcast.
Yes.
But spiritual warfare is what everyone's asking me about. It's what I had Father Turbo send a message for the last episode. Father Turbo's awesome. Just super awesome. Okay, so spiritual warfare. Are you feeling it this time around, this Lent? Like, are you feeling a little bit more of an attack?
It's interesting. I'm feeling less of one.
Wow. And
it coincides with me doing the actual diet stuff more. I hate to even, that's a stupid word for it, but following the prescribed meals, let's say, I've done that much more than before. Okay. And the prayer rule much stronger than before. We always have lapses. I just went on a vacation to Vegas. Obviously there was lapses in certainly the dietary aspect of it, and probably the prayer rule too. But outside of little blips here and there, I've been trying to do it more than before. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's given me grace for whatever reason. I certainly am undeserving, but among the people that have said they've had harder attacks, I feel like for this particular time, I've been more blessed. And so I don't know why that is, but I'll take it, because I've had the opposite, and it's not as fun.
Yeah, no, it's not. And that's great that, because, it does seem like intense this time around for some of us. And like I would do it when I was younger, and I don't ever remember this. So it's encouraging to hear that there's a few people out there that are not having the spiritual warfare, and to hear what you're doing. That's pretty awesome.
There's always the spiritual warfare aspect of things. That can be those little attacks come often.
Yeah. But
the overall like gut punches are less this time. Thank God.
Oh, thank God. Absolutely. All right, brother. Getting to the end of it. Any final words? Obviously plug everything, but before you get to the plugging, final words. How do you see all of this punk subculture, libertarian, everything we just talked about, truth, crate digging, Father Seraphim World, all of that
digging.
Stuff.
Man, the crate digging, only certain people are going to reference or get that reference. That's going to record stores and finding these crates and trying to find the stuff in the back that you've hidden at another time because you can't afford it. You used to do that too. See, he knows. Keep digging. It's an ongoing process. You're never once saved, always saved, if you will. This is an ongoing attempt to be saved. remain humble if possible. Pride Month is coming up. I will say that pride is something that affects everyone. It's just that during that month, our pop culture thinks it's a good thing. It's not. But it's not just that particular group of people that have it or struggle with it, although they promote it, but everyone has issues with it. And you can tell when it's something you're dealing with or trying to fix, the moment you start talking to someone who is swelling up with it, it's very obvious. So keep that in mind. I would say that's the worst one. And don't tell people you know where they're going when they die. Mm-hmm. That's not up to you. Try to remain humble throughout this. This is a constant process, and we all struggle. And that's where I would leave it. If you're into punk rock like I was and am, it's not like you have to give it all up. Just try to understand what you might view as an idol, what you're actually worshiping. Maybe pull that back a bit and just appreciate it for some good workout music or for pulling you into where you're at now.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Where can everyone find you? Plug anything you got coming up, my brother.
I'll give you my address. No, I'm joking. You guys can find me at counterflowpodcast.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. That's where it drops every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time, thereabouts. But if I switch it up, you'll get the notification if you subscribe to the page. We have a Telegram group for Counterflow. Let's see. Follow me on Twitter at Buck Rebel, BuckRebel, and see that rebel part. I've had that tag since, my first AOL mail account. So the Rebel, the Buck Rebel, it's always been there. Yeah. Buck Rebel on Twitter, and that's about all I got. And I so appreciate you doing this and having me on, and that the music show's just phenomenal. I love that you do that too.
Thanks, brother. Thanks you. Thanks again, Buck, for doing this, and I'm going to catch you soon, brother.
Thank you, man.